back. One of the most painful things about the COVID experience is surely when we hear about people who had to die alone and isolated. Both painful for the people concerned, no doubt, if they were conscious of slipping away, but especially painful for their families not being able to be with them and to accompany them in their last moments on earth. There is a book written about Therese by a French priest called Jean Delbé, and in it he talks about that we should never look at the cross without Jesus, because nobody could bear the cross alone without Jesus. Most normal people would run to avoid the burden of the cross, and Therese was no different from the rest of us in that respect. She had no illusions about her strength, nor about her courage, nor about her holiness, nor about her littleness. In fact, she was convinced she could do nothing without the power of Jesus. But with the power of Jesus, she believed she could follow in his footsteps and carry the cross. For Therese, when two people loved one another, it was the most natural thing in the world that they wanted to reciprocate that love. She firmly believed she was loved by Jesus, and she was convinced with every desire of her heart that she wanted to return that love, and she wanted to resemble him in carrying her cross by his strength. Of course, Therese believed that by carrying her cross, she could, like Jesus, secure the salvation of sinners in her own little way and win the grace for them to return to Jesus and be saved. You've heard me say that from the act of consecration to merciful love that she made in June 1895, Therese's life took on a new determination. If we follow the lines of her poetry, we get another insight to her inner struggles. Her poetry, it is said, is not without literary merit, but it's couched in words and phrases that in our day and age, well, many of us would find sweet and saccharine and a little bit too pious for our tastes. But nevertheless, we would be foolish not to fail to read what she was saying and what she wanted to express through this medium. She was a great fan, by the way, of the poetry of St John of the Cross, the co-founder of the Carmelite Reform with the great Teresa of Avila, and she often drew great strength from his poetry and from his sufferings and from his invitation for the Christian to share in the cross of Christ. She also loved, like him, a particular book in the Bible, a poetic love poem, the Canticle of Canticles, or the Song of Songs. It was one of her favorite books. But often beneath the verse, as I say, that she wrote, Therese is deadly serious when she talks about sharing in the sufferings of Christ and his death, being hidden from the world and suffering in silence. Of course, if you're not into poetry, this particular talk is not going to make a lot of sense. But, you know, we have this problem with poetry in general anyway. If I was to say to you from Joseph Mary Plunkett's poem, I see his blood upon the rose, or if I quoted from the Scottish poet Rabbie Burns, my love is like a red, red rose. If I said that to a child or to someone who doesn't understand poetry, they'd be saying, well, what has love got to do with a rose and the colour red rose? But to Therese and her companions, poetry meant a great deal, especially when talking about the following of Jesus and the mysteries of the spiritual life, because this can't be put in mathematical, scientific language. We grasp, you know, one of the most popular programs on Radio 4, BBC, is a slot once a week, I think on a Saturday evening, where Poetry Please, it's called, where people love to hear their favourite poems being read, and it's an all-time favourite, again and again. Now, some of the sisters looking at Therese and hearing her read her poetry, or it being written for their feast day or a particular event in the convent, they maybe thought, is this lady on a perpetual high all the time? But in fact, when she wrote much of this poetry, far from it. She was not feeling any high at all, but was very much feeling the dark night of the soul and the dark night of the senses, and struggling to hold on to her faith. To give an example, she wrote a poem for a young, feisty novice called Sister Mary of the Trinity on her 21st birthday. It's called My Heaven Above. I beg your pardon, My Heaven Below, which later was included under the Canticle of the Holy Face. Oh, to console you, I wish to live unknown upon this earth. Your beauty that you know how to hide unveils all mystery to me. To you, I wish to soar aloft. Well, the young, laughing Sister Marie of the Trinity would not have wanted to soar aloft at this time. She's very much a down-to-earth type of woman, and very independent and unpredictable. Deportment was not her talent. St Therese was her novice mistress in effect, although she did not have that official title. To another cousin, her Sister Mary of the Eucharist, in August 1895, she gave a poem with these words: Jesus, in Carmel I wish to live, since your love has called me to this oasis. There I wish to follow you, to love you and to die. This really reads like a program for a Carmelite's life, and Therese, as I say, is being deadly serious. The following October the 17th of the year 1895, Mother Prioress gave her a new companion to write to, a new correspondent, a seminarian, a spiritual brother called Maurice Bellier, and she was to pray for him and to correspond with him, to encourage him in his vocation. Therese again was thrilled, because this was an answer to her prayer to make Jesus known and loved far and wide, and she was so grateful to God for this blessing. Another poem written to her Sister Mary of the Sacred Heart, our own blood sister, expresses some of the feelings Therese had about her mission and her purpose in Carmel. To contemplate your glory, I know I must pass through fire, and I choose for my purgatory your burning love, O heart of my God. My exiled soul, on leaving this life, would want to make an act of perfect love, and then, taking flight to its heavenly fatherland, enter your heart without any detour. Further, to her cousin, Sister Mary of the Eucharist, in another poem, she spoke about her thirst for love. Now, the idea of Jesus' thirst and Therese's thirst was very strong. Once she identified the thirst of the Lord on the cross, her own thirst for souls and for bringing people to God was to develop and grow. And she longed to live by faith and to die a martyr and to die of love. And this coincides with her completing manuscript A and with what she wrote there. And now I have no other desire but to love Jesus unto folly. I no longer desire suffering or death, and still I love them both. It is love alone that attracts me. I possessed suffering and believed I had reached the shores of heaven, that the little flower would be gathered in the springtime of her life. But now, abandonment alone guides me. I have no other compass. We realized that she had wanted to die and that she believed she would die young, but then no longer seemed sure. Instead, she abandoned herself to God's will, rather reminiscent of St. Paul the Apostle, is it not? If you remember, writing to one of his community, said, I'd like to go to the Lord, but if for your sake the Lord needs me to be with you to guide me, then I'll stay. But I just want to do his will. Therese wrote this: "My dearest mother, you allowed me to offer myself to God in my act of oblation in June, and you know the rivers, or rather the oceans of graces that have flooded my soul. Ah, since that happy day, it seems to me that love penetrates and surrounds me, that each moment this merciful love is renewing me, purifying my soul, and not leaving any trace of sin in it, and I have no fear of purgatory." But that year ended up with the admission of not knowing how things will end. In January of the new year, 1896, Therese, as I say, had completed manuscript A, and she wrote a poem for Mother Agnes's feast day and wrote a play and performed in it for her entitled The Flight into Egypt. In late February, Celine, her sister, made her profession and received the veil on the 17th of March. The same day, her cousin Marie Guerin received the habit, and all looked good for the young novice mistress. After years of trial, she set her heart on giving herself to Jesus and dying of love, so to speak. But before March was out, Mother Marie de Gonzague was elected prioress once more. And though Therese still had the novices in her care, things changed. Several days later, in Holy Week, Therese during the night coughed up blood. And you and I might think this is a disaster, but not Therese. She wrote about it several months later, describing her joy at the thought of her good fortune. "I was interiorly persuaded that Jesus, on the anniversary of his own death, wanted me to hear his first call." You know, like she's evoking the story of the bridegroom who arrives late at night, and the bridegrooms are sleepy and they have to wake up fast to welcome him. I said earlier that some people don't get poetry. It makes no sense to them. It's a foreign language. And as well as that, we live in an age when sacrifice is debased and voluntary poverty is considered pure madness. For we who live in the first world, we're obsessed with comfort and possessions. And so there's a kind of general loss of appreciation of the idea of renunciation and self-sacrifice. But now and again a little miracle happens, and you and I have lived through a miracle over these last number of months since March. For we have seen doctors, nurses, and medical personnel and ancillary workers in healthcare during the last while sacrifice themselves unremittingly to save people who caught the COVID-19 virus, and some have even taken ill and died as a result. So we've discovered that these ideals are not simply ideals, not simply illusions, because people that we know and have read about and can see videos and documentaries about, these people have lived them and given their lives for them. Coming back to Therese now, we can see that these entries, that this coughing up of blood during Holy Week is what can be described as her entry into the tunnel of suffering and union with the crucified Christ and all the darkness that it entailed. Going back to a priest I spoke of earlier, Father Jean Delbey, he says, "For Jesus the cross was the means by which he could lead people back to himself, those who do not love him, and to bring back closer those who do not love him enough." Well, this is precisely what Therese wished to do for Jesus, to save souls for him, to follow in his passion and his self-sacrifice. She put it like this: Jesus wants us to have a part with him in saving souls. Now, at this point of her life, she was to enter very deeply into the mystery of the cross and redemption, as we shall see as she becomes increasingly ill unto death. Thank you again for joining me.